Hello, my name is Kristen Bolden, and I'd like to welcome you to The Other Side of History. Now, in our last talk in this series, we talked about Christ cleansing the temple of the money changers. In this talk, I would like to talk on debt. As we discussed in our last talk, all that we have is God's, and He has made us stewards of the money that He has entrusted to us to be used for His glory. Now, Leonardo da Vinci, he once said, "Nothing can be loved or hated unless it is first understood," end of quote. Now, this is true with the subject of debt. Those who have become slaves to debt know that debt is not a good thing, and it is something to be hated. The Bible gives some stories that discuss debt. King David was noted in 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 1 and 2, as becoming captain over those who were distressed and those who were in debt. It says, "David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave Adullam, and when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. And everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them. And there were with him about 400 men." End of quote. So David, he created an army from some of these men who were escaping because of debt. Now, in 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 7, Elisha, he told a widow to pay off her debt. And he says, "Then she," the widow, "came and told the man of God. And he said, 'Go, sell the oil and pay thy debt, and live thou and thy children off the rest.'" End of quote. So there are many, very many, who have not educated themselves so that they can keep their expenditures within the limit of their income. They have not learned to adapt themselves to circumstances. And they borrow and they borrow again and again, and they become overwhelmed in debt. And consequently, they become discouraged and disheartened. We should learn how to use our money economically and to bring our wants within our income. We do not need to hoard up our means, but our expenses should not exceed our income. We should be careful in the spending of our money, and by our daily example, teach lessons of frugality, self-denial, and economy to our children. Children are educated by precept and by example. I have a story that illustrates the dangers of debt. In West Germany, there is a beautiful castle where the Bavarian king, who was Maximilian II, he made a comfortable home for his family. The king taught his son, who was Ludwig, how to be frugal. Well, the king was a practical man, and he knew that managing money and accounts was a very important education for his son. The king made his son, this Ludwig, to keep meticulous accounts of his spending and then to present these accounts to him. Now, when Ludwig wanted to go to the theater, he was required to pay for it himself. Ludwig was very annoyed by all of this, and he thought that his father was condescending towards him. Ludwig's father also felt that it was important to teach his son politics. But Ludwig was as disinterested in politics as he was in saving money. What interested Ludwig and filled his mind and heart was a love for beautiful things. He also loved the legends of the Middle Ages. Ludwig was a dreamer. There were medieval paintings of ladies and knights in the castle where Ludwig grew up. And the stories that he read, they fascinated his mind. Now, Ludwig was born in 1845, and in 1864, something very unexpected happened. The king, he died suddenly, and Ludwig, he became king. So, Ludwig was only 18 years old. He was still a teenager, and he was totally unprepared for his father's death. In this state of shock, he left his father's deathbed in tears. Ludwig was even more shaken when a servant addressed him as Your Majesty. After his coronation, Ludwig II, he stated that he wanted no more unnecessary miserliness, as King Ludwig actually didn't have that much power and was more or less just a figurehead. However, Ludwig's real ambition, it wasn't power or even being king. Ludwig's passion was to build. Just a short walking path away from his childhood home, he started to build a magnificent castle. The first stone was laid in 1869. The castle, it is nestled in amongst the mountains and the trees. The altitude is high, and the region is not very fertile, but the land is used for grazing. The king, Ludwig, was a generous man, and there's a story of a cowherder who came across the king in the woods. The boy, not knowing that it was the king, asked him what time it was. The king asked why he needed the time, and the boy said that he needed to take his cows for milking. The king told him the time, and he asked what farm that he was working at. 2 days later, a servant rode up to the farm, and he gave to this cowherder a pocket watch so that he could see the time for himself when he needed to milk his cows. There are apparently many stories like this story. And of course, it was not wrong for King Ludwig to be kind and generous. It was not even wrong for him to be a lover of beautiful things. Where King Ludwig went wrong was that he got himself into debt. Ludwig had more than one building project. He completed a palace that was patterned after the Palace Versailles in France, which he continued to work on the castle near his childhood home. Now, this castle near his childhood home, it is called Neuschwanstein, and it is a fairy tale castle. Walt Disney actually modeled the Disneyland castle in California after Ludwig's castle. So Ludwig, he was in charge of every detail of the building projects. The intricately painted murals, the gorgeous rooms that are just loaded with gold. His castle had a heating system, battery-operated bells for the servants, and a telephone. There are secret doors and a grotto cave right within the castle. The castle is actually more like a museum than a home. The whole castle, it reflects Ludwig's love for the literary and the art world. The castle may not have resembled very much of a home, but it was Ludwig's fantasy dream. In the beginning, Ludwig used some of his money that he received every year for his building projects. Eventually, Ludwig, he handed over the title Kaiser to Wilhelm of Prussia. As a result, Ludwig Ludwig, he got 300,000 marks every year as a kind of thank you for giving up some of his sovereignty. Now, where Ludwig got into trouble was that he started to overspend and borrow money from foreign banks. Of course, these banks, they were not loyal subjects, and they demanded repayment. They threatened to seize his properties. Ludwig had been warned by his advisors about getting into debt, and they begged him to stop his spending. Ludwig had responded that he just could not quit. He said that building was the greatest joy that was in his life. He said that he was literally driven to build. The Neuschwanstein castle was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, because the castle is on a mountain, and there were construction difficulties. The castle, it pushed the limits for building at that time. Ludwig, he hired the very best of the engineers and scientists. In 1886, Ludwig, he asked for a credit of 6 million marks from Otto von Bismarck, with the intent to complete the castle, after the ministers refused to give him the funds. The ministers of state, they felt that they had to do something. The only way to get rid of the king was to say that he was of an unsound mind. So Ludwig was declared to be mad, and he was placed under house arrest. There was a lake out front of the place where Ludwig was being held prisoner. Ludwig was at this time 40 years of age, and he was in good health. Ludwig was also a strong man and a strong swimmer, and yet his body, as well as his psychiatrists, was found drowned in the lake out front of his prison. Psychiatry, it has been called the industry of death. Ludwig's younger brother had been given psychiatric, quotes, care, so Ludwig, he was very familiar with the system. To this day, nobody knows if Ludwig's death was an accident, suicide, or murder. My personal belief is that it is better to deny yourself 1,000 things rather than to get into debt. There is a curse that often comes with debt. Some have tried to make out debt as being a good thing, but I think that it should be avoided, just as you would the smallpox. There is a freedom in not being in debt and in owing no man anything. If we take care of our pennies, the dollars, they will take care of themselves. Also, if you make the effort to pay off your debts as fast as possible, you will feel the achievement of a great victory. Now, King Ludwig, he lost his freedom purely because of debt. Ludwig only lived actually in this castle of his dreams for 172 days, and he spent 11 nights there. The castle was never able to be completed. Others since have capitalized on Ludwig's beautiful castle, but the building of it was the ruin of King Ludwig II. It was a building project, as beautiful as it was and is, that he could not afford. Millions of visitors, they have visited Ludwig's castle. Even Hitler went to see it once. However, he didn't want to give too much attention to another builder than himself, it's been said. The castle was used during World War II for hiding looted art. There were no air raids in that area. It's said that the Rothschild treasures were kept in the castle. Just before the castle was found by the American army in World War II, the SS officer in charge of the defense of the castle, he was ordered to blow the castle up. Thankfully, the SS officer, he refused the order, and the castle was saved. Now, Ludwig, he attempted his dream, but debt, it removed this dream from him. Debt makes us dependent rather than independent. Ludwig, not careful to live within his means, was not also willing to do without rather than to run up debt. As a result, his dream and his life were removed from him. It really is a very sad story and almost doesn't seem fair how a man like Hitler was able to spend all the money that he did on warfare and killing of the Jews and others, but he was never diagnosed as being crazy. Yet King Ludwig, his love for beautiful things, it got him labeled as crazy because he was not careful to stay out of debt. I believe that this is a warning to all who consider debt as an option. My appeal to you is to practice economy. We do not need to manage our affairs in a way that will incur debt. The practice of drawing money before it is earned, I believe, is a snare. When we voluntarily become involved in debt, we may be entangling ourselves in one of Satan's nets, which he sets for souls. Now, Romans chapter 13, verse 8, it says, "Owe no man anything, but to love one another, for he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law." End quote. So let's show our love for others, as well as ourselves, by seeking to stay out of debt. I hope that you have enjoyed this little talk. If you have, I would just encourage you to click on that subscribe button. I want to thank you for listening, and I'm wishing you God's blessings.